Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I'm your host, Darrell Scott, and together we will dive into the lives and careers of the jazz legends who have left a rhythmic imprint on the world. Be prepared to reminisce on the highs and the lows of their musical journey and the trials that sculpted their timeless musical gems. We'll preserve the legacy of these extraordinary maestros and find inspiration in the melodies of their lives. Subscribe now and never miss a beat. Now, let's get to the show. Welcome to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I am Darrell Scott. My guest today, there are certain people who over the course of your career, I don't know if idolize is the right word, but you hold in higher esteem because of everything that they have done. And I think about this gentleman, and we were just talking about this. 50 years. That is, I'll do it this way, and Jay, you don't have to agree or disagree. That is like 4/5 of my lifetime since I was like a high school kid. Even before then, this music's been a part of me. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you the man who heads one of the finest groups of all time. This is Jay Beckenstein from Spyro Gyra. Jay, how are you today?
I'm great, Darrell. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem, sir. You were coming here to Cleveland as part of the Tri-State Jazz Fest. I want to get that in so everybody knows. So if they haven't bought their tickets, they need to get them now. Or at least start to buy them. Let's talk about the history of this band for a short time. First of all, the name Spyro Gyra. Where did it come from?
Well, that was kind of an accident. I had graduated high school in Germany, in Nuremberg. I went to an American Army base high school. And the only place I had relatives in the States, because my father was staying there for a while, was Buffalo, New York. So I went to Buffalo, New York, and my parents let me. I was going to go to University of Maryland over in Germany, and my parents let me go to the States on my own because I promised I was going to be a medical student.
Okay.
Familiar story to people. Anyway, so yeah, I lasted 1 year. As a medical student, I devolved down the academic evolutionary scale, as you might say. My second year, I was an English major, and by my third, it was saxophone. But my first year, I studied some microorganisms. One of them was called Spyro Gyra. It was an algae, and I studied the reproduction mechanisms of the Spyro Gyra algae. Okay, quite a few years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, Spyro Gyra was just gestating in a small club in Buffalo, New York, called Jack Daniels. And the owner, his name was Tommy. Tommy was impressed with how many people were coming in, and he thought that the jam session should have a band name. So around 2 a.m. after our last set, and Buffalo was one of these towns at the time, maybe not unlike Cleveland in the mid-'70s. There was still an industrial thing going on. Yes. So there were late night shifts. So the clubs could be going at 3 a.m. So we did our last set like at 1 a.m. And like the club is named Jack Daniels. Okay, that's how we got paid. We got paid in Jack Daniels pretty much.
Okay.
And so by the end of the night, everybody was a little sloshed. And Tommy, the club owner, comes over, kind of a used guys should come up with a name. I want a name. I want to be able to advertise. So I facetiously remembered this microorganism, this tiny little green plant, and said, Tommy, call it Spyro Gyra. He misspelled it. That's been it ever since. I showed up the next Tuesday night, and there it was misspelled on on a funky sign, and that's it. When the band first hit, I was mortified. I said, "Oh man, we got this cool thing happening, and I'm stuck with this silly name, Spyro Gyra." And in fact, I think our very first tour, we had people coming out for Greek music. They thought
Wow.
they thought we were a Greek band. Uh, but I've gotten used to the name. Kind of. It, it,
So
it wasn't common.
these many years I've been listening to a microorganism. Okay, I'll take that because there are many
A
different things.
beautiful green thing under the microscope that reproduces well. Come on.
Okay. Now, if we think back, we were talking before, it's roughly 50 plus years that you've been doing this. So you started when you were like 4. Um, did you think at that time in those incubative years that you would still be doing what you are doing and doing it so well?
Not exactly, but my dream of being a saxophonist started very young. I think I 8 or 9. I started having this fantasy. My dad's heroes were Charlie Parker and John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley, and I, I I think maybe I was doing it to please my father, but I really dedicated myself to saxophone very early on. So the dream started early.
Mm, mm, mm. And we're still doing it and still doing it well. You this longevity thing, and it's a group thing. It's not an individual thing. So you've had different personalities come through. We'll call it your living room of jazz, and some have
Mm,
stayed on, some have moved on to different things.
I call it my island, but okay.
Your island, onto your island. How do you manage those different There's a lot that you have to manage. You have to manage the personalities as the group morphs into other organisms or things like that. I'm going to be on this organism thing for the whole interview. But this is a constant growth. But within that growth, you have to grow because you have to manage all these things. What do you think lends to that as far as you are concerned, whether it's Julio Fernandez, Tom Schumann, Kim Stone, all of those different personalities?
I think it's the thing that has made it good for all those people that circulate in the
Hmm.
Spyro Gyra sphere is that there's mutual respect.
Hmm.
It's about respect. People don't come into the band and become sidemen; they become partners. People don't come into the band to back up somebody or to realize somebody else is writing. They're allowed to do their own writing, and they're featured just as much as anybody else at any given time. So it becomes a real positive to play in the band because you really are part of the band when you're in it.
There's a I sometimes try to figure this out. It never works. But if you do 10 songs per album and you do one album a year, you've had 500 songs.
It's in the
Five.
left 300s, I think, something like
Okay.
that. Yeah.
All right. But you've done it. Where does this creativity come from, and how do you maintain it?
Well, you dedicate yourself to trying to make really good music. Period. Uh, you also try as best you can to innovate a little bit. To not just keep repeating the record you made over and over again. Now, you really have to work hard on that. That's the hard part. After you've
Hmm.
written 20 songs, does song 21 sound like one of the first 20? Probably.
Right.
Probably. The hard part is finding new ground. Now, I've been really lucky as a creator. First of all, your question previously about all those other people, I share it. I don't have to come up with 10 songs a record. I come up with 10
Hmm.
songs a record. Other people write. So it tends to spread it out over the years, my creativity. I don't have to like do 10 songs every single time.
Hmm.
Also, I think everybody in the band keeps their ears open to several things. What other people are doing. We hear something really cool, we go, okay, that's really cool. I like that. I'm gonna run in that direction a little. We travel a lot, so we hear a lot of international music. Everything from South Africa to I don't know, to the Ukraine. We've been everywhere,
Hmm.
and we really do hear what their version of jazz is when we go there. Sometimes it's very enlightening, especially the jazz they play in Africa.
Hmm.
And I think we're open to incorporating new things. We're also open to incorporating tech. The history of 50 years of making music is the history of 50 years of music technology.
Hmm.
Uh, from days when I first started off writing, I mean, we were working with four track
Right.
machines.
Hmm.
Our first recordings came out on 8 tracks. So we've seen a lot. We've seen studios change. We've seen recording techniques change, not always for the better.
Hmm.
We've seen audience expectations change. We've seen record company expectations change. We've seen the economics of the music world and the music business change. So our ability to maintain an identity and a survival through all of those 50 years, I will agree, is pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is. I have a few samples of what you've done behind me. It is incredible to realize just the different things that you've done within the music and with your music, um,
Oh,
and
and
the
also
element.
how lucky we were. Oh my
Yeah.
God, how lucky we were. First of all, right from the start, you know, this thing had to be the perfect storm
Hmm.
of stuff to fly the way it did. We had to meet just the right people. We had to be born at just the right time. I really feel very grateful in so many ways that the band was born at a time when music was so fertile.
Yes.
And there was so much stuff to listen to, so much great stuff. Um, and then all along the way, the band has been incredibly fortunate in not self-destructing,
Hmm.
not having individuals in the band that caused friction bad enough to mess it up. To, or I'll put it more positively, for me to have run into such talented musicians like Samuels and Schumann that furthered my musical vision as I furthered theirs. That was
Hmm.
all incredibly good fortune. Deeply grateful.
Let's take a moment to listen to some of the work that Spyro Gyra has done over the years. All these little snippets of songs that we're going to play, don't get me wrong, are my favorites. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's listen to "Catching the Sun" on the Jazz Flight Podcast. That's "Catching the Sun" from the group Spyro Gyra, and the main lead person is Jay Beckenstein. He is our guest today on the Jazz Flight Podcast. Jay, and the other thing too,
I just gotta say before we go on,
yeah,
was the wah wah trumpet solo on that the coolest thing ever?
yes, it was.
I mean, and in the studio, we had no idea. We hired Randy Brecker. It's Randy Brecker. We're going to get a trumpet solo, and he walks in
Right.
with a wah wah pedal. And my first reaction is, oh no! And then he played that solo. It was so cool.
There's so many. The toughest part sometimes about this job is not finding out what you guys have done, is trying to narrow it down to a few songs. I sit here, I look at this foursome back here, and there's I'll call it a hit on everyone, but there's also a song on there that people may not know about that I just truly loved, and I'm going that nobody's going to listen to this part because I'm going to be the only one, and we're going to play another one once we go to our next break. But it's just such a consistent track of doing music that is just so good yet so different. I I'm not, I don't know.
All
I don't
those personalities that were involved in it. Dave Samuels wrote different than I did. Jeremy Walt wrote different than Julio. Everybody wrote different, but everybody brought a wide mental attitude towards it. The jazzers in the group were happy to play the rockers' music. The Caribbean Latin guys were happy to
Right.
try to play straight ahead. Everybody did their best to play everybody else's strong stuff. But the individual writing, heck, that just came from very different backgrounds. And the band was utterly democratic about tackling things. If somebody brought in something really weird, we went for it. If somebody brought in something that was kind of country western, or people wouldn't turn their noses up at it. We'd try to find what we loved in it.
That's always the thing with me. You've got I'm going to say five people in the group, five different personalities, five different songwriting techniques, and you all kind of have to agree on number one songs, the second person song, and that's to manage task all to itself. Real quick, you also came up in a time when a lot of folks said, for lack of a better term, we'll stick with the fusion thing. When they said fusion wasn't jazz. But I
Mhm.
remember, and I told you beforehand, I had a conversation with Dave Grusin, who was at the time the head of GRP Records, and Dave was a big shot, and he was somewhat intimidating to me. Here I am, this little part-time guy, but I'm going to ask this question anyway, and he just kind of sits back and says, "Darrell, you friend of George Benson?" I go, "Yeah." He says, "You know, George Benson comes from West Montgomery, who then comes from Charlie Christian." And at that point, it was like, I am the student. I've learned my lesson. I'm going to shut up and go sit in the back of the class. And that's what it was. But you persevered through all of that to continue to make substantial music. How was it fighting that fight?
Well, first of all, I think that every generation of jazz musicians, going back to the 20s, didn't like the generation that followed it because it always involves, losing something. When we came along in the fusion movement, think about it. Really, what was happening was we were electrifying jazz,
Hmm.
just the way Dylan electrified folk music. People hated him when he played an electric guitar in a folk scene. Okay, well, we came along when electric bass was replacing acoustic bass. And when electric bass replaced acoustic bass, the volume levels came up.
Hmm.
It became a lot more like a theater rock show and less like an intimate club thing. There were many changes, but to me, that was one of the biggest. And jazz, all along its history, has had this marvelous ability to combine. I don't care how far you go back. Its original roots are a combination of African and European. It started as a combo music. Um, and if you look at the 50s, when I was a child and I first heard jazz, it was combining with samba. Dizzy Gillespie was playing salsa.
Hmm.
Um, there was uh, a West Coast jazz scene that was almost classical music.
Hmm.
There was this East Coast scene that was going for something very abstract. I mean, there was so many types of jazz that had so many back influences. Now, so then just immediately prior to us was Weather Report, Chick
Oh
Corea,
yeah.
Herbie
Yes.
Hancock, and and those guys, what they did, first of all, they went with that electrification, but then they
Hmm.
started putting a lot of contemporary world music into their thing. Weather Report is all about Peruvian percussionists and
Hmm.
very tribal sounding rhythm sections. And so it all along the history of jazz has been combining. So when we hit the scene, what did I grow up on? Okay, I grew up on jazz, all that jazz, just like Grusin said. I grew up on Parker, Desmond, Getz. I had my jazz
Hmm.
roots. My saxophone style is directly linked to jazz, but my writing style and how I use jazz is more linked to what I grew up with. And I grew up with Marvin Gaye and the Beatles just as much as I grew up with Paul Desmond and John Coltrane. And
Hmm.
that was part of my musical vocabulary. I think our success and many people's success at the time was when they combined jazz with that contemporary musical vocabulary that I'm talking about, R&B, uh, particularly R&B. Um, it opened the gate to a lot of other listeners to hear it,
Hmm.
and it became because those people were growing up with the same variety of music as we were. Our writing, in its broadness, appealed broadly to people.
Very well stated. Here we go. We're going to play another song, and I have to tell the truth about this particular song. Out of everything that you've done, everything, and I have most of them. There's a few behind me. There's a whole bunch over here on the cabinet that I couldn't put on the shelf. I don't know what it is about this song. It's called Double Take. It seems to be so much different than everything else you've done, but there's an energy that goes with it. The guy playing the saxophone is really, really good. It's just energetic. It's just so good. Ladies and gentlemen, on the Jazz Flight Podcast, I'm not saying I'm debuting it. I'm just telling you this is one of my all-time favorite Spyro Gyra tunes. This is Double Take on the Jazz Flight Podcast. If you don't have it, you need to get it. That is Double Take on the Jazz Flight Podcast from our guest, Jay Beckenstein. Jay, you come to Cleveland. What can our folks expect from this new Spyro Gyra show?
Um, we've got a great show this year. Again, as all Spyro Gyra shows are, it's varied. Um, it's got a lot of different styles, a lot of different features. And then in addition to that, we always play at least three or four of kind of our classic 1970, 1980 tunes. I don't know. It's just a really good show. I don't think we've done a bad show in years. Uh, but after one thing you do learn after 50 years of being out on the road is how to land a show.
Mm-hmm. And you got to learn good restaurants and everything too. So
Oh,
let's.
tell you a restaurant story. So I had an uncle, Uncle Larry, and Uncle Larry had this kind of odd life history. First of all, he was a World War II vet, and in World War II, he saw some
Hmm.
gnarly action.
Right.
He was in Sicily and Monte Cassino and a lot of big battles that were very hard. Anyway, I knew nothing about that. By the time I met my Uncle Larry as a young man, Uncle Larry was a Jewish guy selling Christmas ornaments in the deep South. Okay, weird job. So by the time Spyro got successful, Uncle Larry was now an old man.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Um, and we were starting to tour. And Larry would go, "Look, you're going to Birmingham, Alabama, Route 3. There's a little place on the left side." And Larry, this guy who was a salesman in the South, he knew all these cool ass off the road places. and that's where we would eat. Anyway, I digress.
Right. That's funny. I always
Bless
thought
you, Uncle Larry.
that there was a gentleman just here. His name is Doc Martin. Part of his, I think, his stick, and I have to call him and talk to him about it. He did like a restaurant review. I think I sometimes, in my feeble mind, offer suggestions on things for you guys to do. Number one, I don't know why there are not more picture books where you guys go and take pictures of the area, whether it's France, Spain, Australia, the Ukraine, or whatever. I think
Ah,
that would make for good stuff. I do. When seeing Doc do this, I'm in the restaurant. I'm gonna order this. Let me taste it. Oh, I give it a 7.5 because it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. With all the places you go, I don't know why, and I call them side hustles. I don't know why you don't have little side hustles like that that could make you some change or do whatever. But I also think it's fun to do stuff like that.
you want another good restaurant story? I'll give you a good
What's that?
one. Okay, so we're in a tour bus. I think it's 1980, and we had just played in New Orleans, and we're coming out of New Orleans, and we're going through, somewhere off of Route 10. We wanted to stop for breakfast, so we go off the road, and we find this place called the Steak and Cake.
Okay.
We go in to this place, and while we're eating, the power goes out. Okay, so they can't. The cash registers don't work. So we ask them what the bill is, and we leave cash on the table,
Mm-hmm.
and we split. Okay, we go down the road about 2-3 miles, and our drummer, his name was Eli Konikoff, goes, "I left my stick bag in the restaurant."
Uh,
Okay, so we go back to the restaurant, and Eli walks in the restaurant to get his stick bag, and we notice a guy behind our bus taking our license plate number. And one of the roadies goes out to him and says, "Hey, what are you doing?" This guy pulls out a gun on,
ooh.
on our roadie. Just as he's doing that, police cars start arriving all around us, like 3 Crescent City police cars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what had happened is the staff had pulled the power, stolen the money, and blamed it on those Yankees that had just stopped in here, not knowing that we'd come back.
Mm.
So the at this point, everybody's getting things explained, and basically we're telling the police, why would we come back?
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
We're here. We're not the ones. And our roadie, his name was Greg, starts talking to the policeman and says, "Hey, wait a second. This guy put a gun right in my face. You're not going to do anything?" And the cop turns to the guy and says, "Fred, did you pull a gun on this man?" Fred says, "Well, I thought he was stealing." And says, "Where's your gun, Fred?" So Fred opens the trunk, says, and the cop goes for the gun, and he says, "Hey, it's hair triggered. Easy." So he had a hair triggered pistol in my
Uh,
roadie's face.
mm.
Now, so we're going, "What are you going to do about these people?" To the cops, and they just go, "I think you boys should just
Just
quietly."
leave. Yeah. Mm,
That's
mm, mm.
my New Orleans restaurant story.
Nice. And see, that's the other thing I think about this. I am I am all about the stories that all of you musicians have.
Oh yeah.
I told one of the things I want to do, and it's somewhat impossible, is to find an outdoor venue where you can all sit, or whoever I invite can sit. You have no instruments, you have nothing else. I just want to hear stories like you just told, or Marcus Miller's got a great story that just all the time I think about it makes me laugh. But I'm sure there are those things that people don't know but would find tremendously interesting. Uh,
You
you
know,
know,
you know, Carl, we're doing a 4 1-hour documentary parts right now.
oh,
We've had a doc crew following us for a year, and all of that stuff, lots of road stories. I think they interviewed like 42 people, all our roadies. They've got
Wow.
road stories up to here. So it's going to be a really fabulous documentary coming out sometime within the next year.
You'll have to let me know, and so we can let our folks know.
And about your idea, I think one of the things we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing shows where we show 30 minutes of the doc as the warm
Hmm.
up to
Oh,
the cut.
excellent, excellent.
So, we'll see how that works out. But yeah, we have the stories. Of course, musicians have stories.
I know, I know,
We get,
I
we
know.
get around.
All right, here's another thing. I what It's been 50 years. It's been 300 plus songs. It's been 100,000 miles of travel. What's what are you working on now? What do you got on your plate now to
It's
do?
a documentary, like I just
Okay.
said. I think I preempted your question. That's been the most important thing right now. And right now, I'm getting ready to mix some of it, and it's going to be a big thing when it comes out. It's a real legit company. I'm not going to say it's going to be on
Right.
Netflix, but it's going to be on
Right.
some comparable, and it's going to be licensed in a lot of different countries. I think the band's going to get a good bounce.
Nice.
So right now, I'm kind of looking forward to you know a screaming ending. What I think this thing might last maybe at least another 5 years,
Hmm.
health permitting, and I think they're going to be some of our best years.
Nice. Well, keep us abreast of what's going on. In this day and age, obviously things have changed from a technology standpoint. Does Spyro Gyra have a social media presence? Are you on Instagram, Facebook? Do you?
Yeah, there's spyrogyra.com. We're on Facebook. We have a Spyro Gyra Facebook page. We have all of that,
Because
and
everybody wants to
I
follow
think
you and
that
know what you're doing.
that'll be the first place people get notified of the doc.
Excellent, excellent. Jay Beckenstein. There's certain things that you look forward to, certain people that you look forward to talking to. You're one of them.
Oh,
You're
thanks.
just the history of this band. I think of so many different things, and trust me, I have probably asked, I don't know, 1/11th of the questions that I really had. Um, but I know that this could go on forever. I can't wait to see you guys in concert. Um, I saw you 112 years ago at a place called the Front Row Theater, um, which is very nice. I've played your music since
Before we had a record out, and we were a band in Buffalo, we played Cleveland. We our range was Rochester to Cleveland,
right.
and we played a place called Peabody's in Shaver.
Peabody's down. Yep, know it well. Used to live down the street from it. Know it very well. I'll tell you that story later. Um, but
We
it
also played Blossom, so
yeah,
Peabody's awesome.
right. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to tell you this. Don't laugh at me. You have the perfect storytelling voice. You do. For everything that you've done, your delivery and everything, your tone and everything, it's just great. So what?
Thank you,
Who's
thank you,
who's
Darrell.
who's voice doing the voiceover for the documentary?
There are no voiceovers.
Oh, I
Yeah,
tried.
our documentary makers abhor voiceovers. They believe if you can't get it from the individual,
Oh, okay,
put
makes
it in
sense. That makes
there.
sense.
And it's an interesting thing. We've had this conversation about the doc, and I'm sure they do it when they have to,
Hmm.
because they've done a lot of doc. They're the company is called Lay Carnegie, and I guess the biggest thing they've done is they are the documentarians for all things Star Trek.
Oh,
So
okay.
every Star Trek documentary you've ever seen has been these guys. But they also, interestingly enough, were hired to do a Star Trek theme park in Singapore.
Ooh,
And that's how they met the money men that are funding our documentary. So it's
nice.
actually being funded from an Indonesian businessman.
You never know who you meet and who you talk to and what can
Well,
become of it.
let me go further. That Indonesian businessman, as a young man, saw us play in Jakarta.
Oh,
So there's been this butterfly effect. 30 years ago, this young kid saw us at a concert, and now he's funding this fabulous documentary for us.
Nice.
Isn't that the greatest
That is the coolest thing ever. Jay Beckenstein, once again, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate this. We'll enjoy the time that you play here in Cleveland, and maybe we'll see you some other places around. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. Special guest today is Jay Beckenstein from Spyro Gyra. Most of the time, I'm Darrell Scott. We will talk to you next week. Thank you for tuning in to the Jazz Flyte Podcast. I hope you enjoy the stories and soulful melodies that grew through the doors of time. If you want to stay connected with the latest updates and episodes, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. Until next time, I'm Darrell Scott.